Hello everybody. As you may know, on October 1st, 2019, the new edition of the APA Style Manual came out, the 7th edition. And in this video, I'm going to just highlight some of the major changes with respect to formatting only, particularly focusing on student papers. So one of the first things you might notice from this picture here is that the spiral-bound version of the APA manual comes with tabs, which is wonderful. Because if you've ever been in my 304 class, you know that I had asked you to tab different sections of the APA manual because it was very difficult to find things. Well, now these tabs are very helpful, and believe it or not, it is much easier to read and understand this manual. Okay, here are the topics that we're going to cover in this video. Again, this is just focused on formatting. There have been many content changes as well as language use. That's a big portion of the changes. But in this video, I'm only going to be talking about formatting. So we're going to investigate general formatting rules, anatomy of an APA-style research paper, headings, title page, abstract, in-text citations, and then the references list, because those are the parts of the APA-style research paper that's changed the most. Okay, first, the general formatting rules. What is the same as before is that all pages have a 1-inch margin on all 4 sides, so that part's exactly the same as the 6th edition, and we still use double spacing throughout the paper. Except for a couple of situations. Those situations haven't changed since the 6th manual. If you really want to know, you can go to page 45 of your of the new manual and you can find out what special exceptions there are. But for most things that you will be doing, you just need to know double space throughout the paper. Now what's different are the following. First of all, we only use 1 space after a period throughout the paper. Previously in APA style, we were using 2 spaces after a period in the body of the text, and just in the references list, we just used 1 space, but now it's all consistent. And another big change is that whereas we were only to use Times New Roman font size 12 previously, now we have 5 different fonts to choose from. Calibri 11 point, Arial 11 point, Lucida 10 point, Times New Roman 12 point, and Georgia 11 point. In the psychology department at Lindenwood, we decided to require that students use either Times New Roman font size 12, which is what they've been using all along, or Calibri 11, which is the default font for Microsoft Word, which is the major word processing software we have here on campus. So those are the 2 fonts that we're accepting in our department. However, each department may be different. Basically, the font is up to the professor to decide. So you want to make sure you check with your professor before you write your paper. Okay, in terms of the anatomy of the APA Style Research Report, everything seems to pretty much remain the same. So we have the title page, abstract, introduction, method, results, discussion, followed by references. And then some optional sections include tables, figures, and appendices. Well, there's 2 additional optional sections that are new to the new edition, and they are footnotes and supplemental materials. So footnotes are used to provide additional information or to attribute copyright for something. And supplemental materials are only used for papers that have been published in online journals. And these supplemental materials can be in the form of audio clips, video clips, templates, worksheets, and so on. As a student writing papers in school, you probably will not be having to use footnotes or supplemental materials. Okay, here are the headings. This has changed a little bit. So the first level headings are centered and boldface and title case. The second level headings are left justified, bold-faced, and in title case. And then the third level heading is where it changes. It's now left justified, bold-faced, italics, and title case. So there's quite a few things there to remember. Left justified, bold-faced, and italics, and then it's also title case. The fourth level heading looks like what the third level heading used to look like in the 6th edition, which is where you indent, boldface, and then you use title case, but you end that with a period. And then finally, the fifth level is indented, boldfaced, and italicized with title case ending with a period. For the fourth and fifth levels, if you are ever to use this, I don't think you're going to encounter this very often as a writer, but you would begin the text that goes under this heading on the same line as where the header left off. Whereas the first three levels, you would start the text in a brand new line and you paragraph indent. Okay, now we're down to the title page. This is one of the biggest changes and the change that I'm most excited about. There are now different standards for student papers and papers that are going to be published in a journal. So basically student papers versus professional papers. And in the student paper, here's all what you need to include on the title page. So the page number still remains 1, the title of the paper, name of the student or student authors, and then in addition to the institutional affiliation, we also have to put the departmental affiliation as well. So that's new. Then underneath that are 3 brand new things you have to add, which makes the title page look a little bit more like an MLA type title page. They are the course number and title, name of the professor for whom you're writing the paper, and then date of submission. You may have noticed 2 missing parts from the previous edition, which is the excitement. There's no more running head, woohoo, and no more author note, which makes me so happy because, as you know, it is kind of a pain to do these things, and it took up a lot of time for me to be teaching how to put the running head on the title page. You know, that took quite a bit of time in my precious 304 class period. So now we don't have to worry about it. Here's a sample title page that you can look at to see the actual formatting. And I actually purposely use Calibri 11 point font so that you can see what that looks like, because we're used to the Times New Roman. Okay, notice some new things. For example, the title of the paper is in boldface. There are no more word limits, so you can have more than 12 words if you like. But it should be in title case and succinct though, even though you can make it longer. And you have to still avoid obvious phrases such as a study of. Then another thing that's new is you have to leave a space, a blank space between the title of the paper and the author names. And then don't forget to put the departmental affiliation along with the institutional affiliation under your names. And you'll notice how we use the subscript to denote which of these student authors belongs to which department. And then underneath that affiliation information, we have the course number and name, the course professor's name, and then the paper submission date, all centered. Okay, the abstract has also changed in some ways. So first of all, it's an optional section for student papers. And at Lindenwood, we decided that it would be up to the professor to decide for each course whether an abstract is required or not required. So you want to make sure that you read the instructions or consult the professor for whom you're writing the paper. Previously, we had to make our abstract between 150 and 250 words. Well, the new rule says you just can't exceed 250 words. So this is a lot easier because you can have as short an abstract as you want as long as you have all the major content in it. Another new thing is that APA is now accepting 2 types of abstracts. The first type is, just like in the 6th edition, 1 non-indented paragraph, double-spaced. But the second type that's also allowable is the structured format, and I'll show you an example of it in the next slide. Keywords are still optional, but they're formatted exactly the same way as the 6th edition, so you don't have to worry about having to look that up. Okay, here's a sample structured abstract. As you can see, there are little headers like purpose, methods, results, and so on, followed by the text that correspond to that purpose, header. So this might be making it easier for you to write as well. Um, at Lindenwood, we're going to leave it up to the professor of each course to decide what kind of abstract he or she would require, if any, and you would have to follow that professor's instructions for that particular assignment. Okay, the basics of citing sources has not changed. We still use the author date citation method where we take the author's last name, and if there's multiple authors, we grab all of the author's last names in the same order that they appear in the source, and then put it together with the year of publication. As you know, there are two types of ways in which we can cite sources in the text. We can do a narrative citation where we put the author's name and year of publication within the sentence, so it's part of the sentence. And then the parenthetical citation is where you complete a statement, and then at the end of that statement, usually, we put in parentheses the source information. This is called a parenthetical citation. We still have both in the 7th edition, but there has been a big change. Let's see if you can pick it out. So with the one author, we would put the last name of the author followed by the year of publication. For parenthetical citations, within the parentheses, we would type the author's last name, comma, space, year of publication, close parenthesis. That hasn't changed. If you have two authors, you have to list both authors' names in the narrative citation and put the word "and" in between them, and then put the year of publication in parentheses. For the parenthetical citation of two author sources, we put both authors' names within the parentheses, but we separate them out not by the word "and" but the ampersand. Then we put a comma before we put the year of publication in the parentheses. So those two have not changed. But look what happened to the 3 or more situation. So if you have a source with 3 or more authors, we can just take the first author's last name and put et al. Period from the very first mention. This is brand new. So previously you had to cite all of the authors' names up to 5 whenever you mention that source for the first time in your paper, and then subsequently you could use the shorthand Jones et al. Period. But now in the 7th edition, we're allowed to just put the first author's last name et al. Period from the very first mention. So it's gotten a lot simpler. When you are citing multiple sources, the rules have not changed. It's alphabetical order by the first author's last name. So in the previous slide, I showed you Kuhn 2018, Burns and Brown 2015, and Jones et al. 2017. If I wanted to cite all 3 sources within the same parentheses, because maybe all 3 of them said something similar, and I want to show that all 3 of them said this, then I would have to order them not chronologically, but alphabetically by the first author's last name. So Burns and Brown is B, Kuhn is C, Jones et al. Is J, so we would have to order them in the fashion that I have on this slide. And this has not changed at all, but I just want to make this point because this is something that students mess up sometimes. You never, ever, ever reorder the authorship. So, for example, Burns and Brown, you don't scramble the order of Burns and Brown. You must always take this source to be Burns and Brown 2015. You may not put Brown first and call it Brown and Burns because Brown comes before Burns alphabetically, because that is tampering with the order of authorship. And authorship order is very sacred and we must leave it alone. Okay, now we're moving on to the references list. There have been a couple of changes, but mostly it's all the same. We still have to do the picky details about italicizing and putting punctuations here and there and whatnot. But what has changed is that the DOI, also known as the Digital Object Identifier, must now include the portion where it says https://doi.org/ and it must be hyperlinked. Previously, it was not to be hyperlinked, but now we want to hyperlink it. And plus, we don't have to put DOI colon anymore. So this is what it would look like here, where it's underlined. Okay, this is what we would have to put for the DOI. And notice how it's hyperlinked so that it can be easily accessed. But everything else about how to put everything in APA style has not changed. in the references list for journal articles. When you encounter a journal article whose DOI is not on the actual paper, we still have to look it up on crossref.org. And if we can't find it on crossref.org, we have to put a web link. But that link is no longer the URL for the journal's homepage. That was the case for the 6th edition. Now you have to display the permalink that's associated with the article. So a direct link to the article is necessary, not the journal homepage. So if you were to search for an article using a database in the library, do not use the URL that appears at the top of the screen when you are looking at your article, because that is a sessional URL and it doesn't work elsewhere. You must find the little button that says permalink, and if you click on it, you'll see the actual permalink appear like I'm showing you here on the screen, and you would copy that long permalink and list that. And you do not put retrieved from or anything, you just put the link. So that's gotten a little bit easier. Okay, now when listing books in the references list, the biggest change is that we no longer need to cite the city or the state or the country from where the book came from. So this is what it would look like. Everything else is the same, but we got rid of the city and state. So now we just put the publisher's name after the title of the book. Okay, well that's about it in terms of formatting. Remember, this is just a formatting video. The content has changed too. There's a lot of new rules on biased language use and pronoun use. So you want to make sure you cover that because it's very important. And thankfully, there are more examples of different sources to list in the references section. So I only covered journal articles and books in this video, but you do want to get a hold of this, especially if you're in the field and you're going to need to write your papers in APA style. This is a very good investment. You can always buy your copy from apa.org right here.